Right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. It's Sunday Sessions, 27th of December, 2020. Well, thank you very much, everyone that's here for joining us for our weekly time of exploring nature-centered folklore, connecting this within your favorite sanctuary space and expressing inspired visions from your sanctuary through your poetry, writing, art, craft, performance, and problem solving. Now, today's Sunday session is very different location. This is Claire's house, and I've got minimal equipment, so it's going to be fairly sort of casualish today. And I'm just watching for the sun. I hope that doesn't get too bright to the back there, but I will definitely adapt as we go on. And I trust you've all had a wonderful solstice and fun gatherings through your Christmas as best you can do. And St. Stephen's Day, Boxing Day, if you celebrate that yesterday, I hope you're in great spirits. And we'll continue this Sunday session and the next one. They're really kind of overflows from the December traditions and the New Year traditions I haven't covered so far. But I'm going to focus on first footing and explain what that is, and wassailing into 2021. And both of those really, you can connect them as being times of affirmation and community fellowship. Now, we got a couple of delightful guests to share with this. Unfortunately, the panel, I put a note out for a panel to join us, but the people that were going to join in the panel, unfortunately, with most of them, either their internet has gone down today because there are storms through Ireland, UK, Europe, and USA, or they're actually got guests around and they're carrying on the feasting, and so they should. But in a way, if you've ever seen the poem that I've done, The Oak Tree That Went Viral, it's in the Having a Laugh book, which I'll have to talk about at some point. But I think I'm going to have to bring out a version for the Sunday sessions, probably call them the Sunday seances. And is anybody there? Can you hear me? Oh, that's a point. Can you hear me? I'm using a different microphone because the regular microphone I use is too bulky. So I brought this one that I haven't used for years. So do tell me if you're actually hearing me. But the couple of guests we've got, let's see, we've got Maura. Let's get to the pictures here. We've got Maura Barrett, who couldn't get through last week. She isn't in the green room yet. Let's hope she will get there. Let's find Maura here. I've got to remind you of who she is. She is there at some point. There's Maura there. And we've also got Marion Peter Marks. And we'll have a little minute from her. So 2 wonderful poems coming up. But here's some pictures. There's the first footing that we're going to be covering. And there's a family doing a wee bit of the wassailing there. So, first of all, let's see who we've got. There's a few comments going through. There's Sherry. Oh, great. You got on board, Sherry. Good morning. Good morning from Maine. And Margie, she's there. Happy New Year, Margie. There's quite a lot of you, isn't there? Sharon, hello from London. And Donna, ever faithful Donna, lovely. Happy holidays to you, Donna. Good morning from New Mexico and to everyone. And Sherry, thanks for telling me that the microphone's fine, because I didn't no way of knowing until someone says. So thank you for confirming that. And Donna's hearing fine, and Margie is saying fine. So thank you. Snowy morning in Winnipeg. Anybody, Margie, you in the west, have you got snow? I've been hearing reports of snow out in the west of Ireland, little bits that are coming down. So great. And Sherry, if you can hold on, well, we got a bit of a feature. Sherry's got this lovely book that we needed to get in, and I'm going to see if we can actually get Sherry to actually say something on that. So thanks very much. Let's get on with the show here, and get to the photo album here to go through it. So first footing indeed. And you can have a wee bit of read of that for a moment, because I'm just going to send a little message to Sherry here. Oh, it doesn't work. Oh dear. Okay. The messenger thing doesn't work anyway. How am I going to work this one? I haven't. All right. Okay. That's not going to work. Sherry, if you're hearing, can you message me your email, and or send me an email, and I'll see if I responded. It'd be lovely to get you on live to talk about your book if we can. And it's usually a messenger link, sending a link through Messenger, but that's down today. Anyway, so why should a dark-haired stranger carrying a lump of coal be the most welcome visitor after midnight on the 31st of December? Someone like that, maybe? Well, the main reason this is happening is this is very much a Scottish thing, and it was very much a tradition when I was in the Hebrides, very much in the Highlands and Islands. And there was one guest I was hoping to get from the Isle of Mull, but her internet is down. So she sent me a wee note of how first footing is now. So I'll probably read that to you a little bit later. But the main reason it's happening as a New Year tradition is it was actually banned by the Wee Free. And the Wee Free Presbyterian Church of Scotland, they ban Christmas. They're a bit like the Puritans that came over to the USA, and you understand what I mean. I got some pictures of some Wee Free people. There we go. That's a typical Wee Free minister. I bet you've seen some of that in US history. And there's their Wee Free church, a typical one in Scotland Highlands. And there's a Wee Free minister with his family. And I bet for some of you, that brings back different sorts of memories. Anyway, they banned the solstice celebrations, Christmas celebrations, and also Samhain celebrations. In Ireland, people still close their books, close their accounts at the end of October. All debts are settled, all disagreements are settled. And this was very much a tradition on Tara, as I've said in past Sunday sessions. But the Scots, what they did was actually move it forward to the 1st of January. They were allowed to celebrate New Year. The Wee Free were allowed that. They weren't allowed Christmas and solstice because they regarded that somehow being too much of a Catholic. And they regarded Catholics as a pagan tradition anyway. That's typical Wee Free. I'm not going to go into the politics of that. But this did mean that the Norse origin of Yule wasn't allowed too. So it's all of December the 31st. That's acceptable. And which is quite funny that that's acceptable January the 1st, because that is set by a Catholic Gregorian calendar. But that's another debate anyway. But in Ireland now, December the 31st, all debts and treaties have had to be sorted by the 31st of December. In Ireland, that's the 31st of October. And then the celebrations can be had. And so let's get back to the dark-haired stranger who's carrying the lump of coal. Get to my picture library here. To get some, there we go. Oh yeah, this was a thing as well. I don't know why I brought that up. The flight of the Earls, because of course the influence going over to Ireland as well. I'll talk about that a bit later. Anyway, the stranger carrying the coal was regarded as good luck, because if it was a blonde-haired male carrying an axe like this fella, it was not good luck. And of course, if it was a blonde hair, they're probably going to massacre you. It's the whole Viking, going back to the whole Viking thing. So the first footer going from house to house may carry a fuel item for the fire to represent warmth, a coin to represent prosperity, and bread. These days it's a slice of back bun, which I'm going to show, but bread so that people don't go hungry, and a drink, which is usually whiskey, which is to represent being happy and joyful. Now, black bun I mentioned. I did on Facebook show some black buns that I made. Absolutely love them. It's kind of like a Christmas pudding, Christmas cake that's wrapped in pastry, and I've got some variations here. So this is what's shared during the first footing, and I absolutely love black buns. Really, I sort of prefer them to Christmas pudding and Christmas cake, really. So that's one black bun. There's another black bun. And sometimes they put a bit less pastry on, like that one. They're all black buns, and it's what's served with the... it's what's actually served when people call around. Now, first footing actually wasn't exclusive to Scotland. It did actually come over, eventually arrived in Ireland with the planters. And the planters being Lowland, some Highland Scots, they brought some of their traditions over, and these traditions kind of spread through the country, and they influenced some of the Irish. Well, it's faded away a lot now, but it's the whole fellowship thing, the hospitality. And there's a map of that you can see. This is where the planters went to, all along the north there, down the Midlands, and then Cork and Kerry down there. Very much that's the places where the planters were shifted into. This happened from about the 1550s, is the onwards, and then kind of faded. But what happened when the planters came here? They actually added a few more traditions, added to the Scottish ones they were familiar with. And one was, if the first visitor after midnight was a red-haired woman, no matter how much food and drink she was carrying, how many offerings she had for the household, she was a red-haired woman. Go away. It was regarded as an omen of nasty things to come. Very masculine, isn't it? Anyway, she was sent away, unfortunately. They still wanted that dark-haired man with a bit of fuel and the whiskey and the black bun. And there was also a huge tradition, and if you're familiar with Irish hospitality, in order to help other people, they'll just give the shirts off their back. The hospitality is incredibly generous in Ireland, but January the 1st was the one day when nothing was allowed to leave the house or the cottage home. From midnight on December the 31st, right through to the midnight on the 1st. Because if they let more stuff leave the house than what came into the house, to them that was an omen of poverty and hunger for the year ahead, and even illness. Now, one day against the Irish instinct. Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's one day against Irish instinct. Very odd. As I say, the first footing is only done by a few people, I think, today. So if you had no offerings, like this fella, I got some fella here. If you came with no offerings, he's just got his fiddle, he's going to have a tune, he'd still be sent away because he hasn't got any food, hasn't got any drink. Regard is not added anything to the cottage. And when people did come and they did have their food and drink, the other thing that developed in Ireland is when they went through the door, it was also a bad omen if they went out the same door they came in, because that was regarded as something coming out of the cottage. So they had to go out the back door. And of course, some of these cottages, they don't have a back door, so they had to climb out through the window. I did have photos of that, but unfortunately, I couldn't find them. But the one thing is, nobody is allowed to leave through the front door, unless, of course, they party on until after the midnight of the 1st. Then they can leave through the front door. Anyway, it was the day of the 1st in Ireland was known as the night of the big portion. And I've got something in the spelling of this, the Irish, there we go. The night of the big portion. Ican na Coda Mór. That's the night of the big portion. And this is when the Irish who actually could be gluttonous and eat more than they would normally have to any day throughout the year. And then the Irish, the black bun, they had the cake for dessert. And if I can get my photos up, let's have a bit of cake. Wasn't much different to the black bun. It's called gur cake, and it's more pastry. The pastry on it is a little bit lighter than the heavy shortbread that they have on the black bun. Sometimes it's just cake. That's something that they serve. But the gur cake, here we go. A few pictures of that. Icing sugar on that. There's another one. And there's a lovely, light, crispy one there. Very similar filling, perhaps a bit more bread, but funnily enough, it is lighter. And inside this, they would put tea. In the Scottish black bun, you put whisky in it as flavouring. But being Irish, they put tea in it. It's like a variation of a tea cake. And another one into the Irish tradition. You get some of the gur cake, and what happened was the eldest man in the cottage before anybody could eat the cake, would actually break up pieces of the gur cake and throw it up against the front door. And this was 3 pieces in the name of the Trinity. Of course, everything in Ireland is 3. And it's also, if they do that and hit the front door, it's to banish hunger, banish poverty, banish any influences coming in that will bring hunger and poverty to the household. And then the cruel thing is the rest of the family then had to go to the front door, pick up the crumbs and eat it. So that was part of that tradition. Again, they didn't do that in Scotland. This is Irish developments. And when he was throwing the bun, the eldest man, there was an actual traditional rhyme. May your nets always be full, your pockets never empty, your horse not cast a shoe, the devil not look at you during the coming year. And so another thing that the people would do, now the family could go outside the front door, and the one thing they would do, maybe it was the older man again, is to check which way the wind was blowing. Of course, there's a lot of it blowing around at the moment. Now, if the wind was blowing from the west, that meant there was good fortune coming in. But unfortunately, if it was blowing from the east, old tradition, it was saying that the British would soon arrive and make you hungry and poor. And fortunately, we haven't had a major east wind through the Brexit sign-up. But that's the way it is. And of course, anything between east and west is a sort of a pendulum. The more to the west, the more prosperous it's going to be for the year. More to the east, the more it's going to be taken away. Now, the best part of this, the whole thing, as you can imagine, with the first footing and whatever way the Irish did it, is the fellowship of all this. And the Irish first footing is much like the Scottish rural Cayley. If people come around to a home, they say, we're going off to Cayley. Yeah, and they're not just going off for a visit. They're going off to someone's home, off to a cottage for a Cayley. And they still do the home visiting in Ireland with a first footing, or they used to, just like in Scotland. But eventually everybody, and you don't know until it starts, it's a real organic thing. The home visits would evolve into everyone in the same place, several people in the same home, which of course we can't do at the moment. And everybody would share what they brought along in food, drink. And the way the process is, you're all together. And it starts with local gossip, because not so long back in rural areas, the newspapers never got to the rural areas for 2 or 3 days after they were printed. And a lot of areas couldn't get the radio, certainly couldn't get the television, and there wasn't any internet. So it starts off with the gossip. And of course, gossip exaggerates, doesn't it? And as it exaggerates, in comes the folklore stories, which of course are all exaggeration. And especially as the whiskey and the alcohol settling in, it's an excuse to get those stories out. And it's BS time, and as the stories are. But they mean something. They still mean something, as I often repeat with storytelling. It's not the facts that's in the story. It's what you actually hear with your senses that's the truth. And then the singing will start. And I've got some 1 or 2 pictures here. This is with Robin Williamson. And this was actually a setting, and it was down in Kerry, where we actually did this sort of cottage Katie setting. I can't remember the woman's name, but it was absolutely lovely. And we went through this whole thing, if you're familiar with Robin Williamson, harp, storytelling, multi-instrumentalist. Lovely evening. And that's them together. And then eventually, as the drink was going down, the story's being told, the songs are being sung, and along the half dog gets thrown down and the dancing starts. And then after a bit of dancing, there's a reflection on the people are not there. Empty seats are brought around the fire to honor the people when they're not present. And then the fire dims down and everybody goes home. So that's a little run through on the first footing in Scotland, and a little bit of it that came into Ireland. So, excuse me, let's see. Just to run through what you're saying here. Claire's somewhere. Hello, black bun. Claire loves black bun. Yeah, I've got some at Carracrory when we get there. And then Donna, black bun, interesting. Have to find the recipe. Very simple, Donna. It's, as you can imagine, it's a cottage recipe, and it's made with stuff that's going to be around the cottage, nothing complicated. So it really is a fruit, stale bread. You can put, if you've got any dates and figs, put those. I like to put ginger in because, in fact, in Scotland and Ireland, ginger was actually made illegal for the peasants to eat. The only time they could get ginger is around the solstice, around Christmas, because the people in the big houses, as the gifts that they gave at the time, would include a bit of ginger. And sometimes they would save that ginger, and what was left over the following year, they'd start making their black buns September and October, and any leftover ginger would go into it. So there's the fruit, whiskey, Ireland tea, and then short cross pastry is quite standard, obviously with grain, wheat, oats, and your wardrobe milk and the butter. The usual simple, uncomplicated short crust that you just wrap it around. And that crust, like a Cornish pastry, it keeps the mold away. It keeps the cake fresh so it can mature within the crust. And it's lovely after a few months old, but a few weeks. The one I made is just a few weeks. So, what we got? Sharon May here. I remember people first footing at my grandparents' house in Scotland. Neighbours always dropping in. You never knew. That's the way it was. You just didn't know who was going to turn up, and that was the excitement of it. And of course, when you're couples, it's one goes out on the round and one stays in the home. And the first footing, it starts on the 1st, and it keeps going to Epiphany on the 6th, which is in Scotland, it's the old Christmas. So you do this, and it goes on night and day. It's like shifts, just keep going and going and going. And the first on the Isle of Mull, what we used to do is it's all narrow roads, all single track roads, and people would be driving about, and because neighbours would be scattered apart. So as soon as it was midnight, the first person that the people would call on be the local policeman. So to make sure the local policeman was full up with whiskey or whatever before people jumped on their cars and started going around. They had to put the policeman out of action first. And so he never got to do his first footing until the following day onwards, but I suppose there was a bit of blind eye. I doubt if that goes on now because his authority from Glasgow be all over him for that. I was saying about, it's a shame I haven't got Anne Baxter, who's a lovely friend. Anne Baxter is someone in Inverness and Isle of Mull, was absolutely wonderful to visit when we went around because she was a perfect host for the first footing. There'd be this great cauldron of soup and her homemade oat cakes, because in West Brown bread in Ireland, it's oat cakes, rough oat cakes that are made on the griddle. In Scotland, there'd be plenty of whiskey, other drinks for people who are not drinking the whiskey, and just this immediate hospitality, the roaring fire. And when I think first footing, I think of Anne, and I'm going to look on, if you excuse me a moment, I'm going to have a look at her message is here. And this is what she had to say about First Footing today. Let's see. Let's see her comments here. Right. She says, what can I say? And, I was saying, how are you coping with First Footing through the COVID? And she was saying, she goes on to describe that people aren't visiting. Not visiting at all, which is very odd, and people find that odd. And even the local shops, she's saying here, are not allowing people in, the little village stores. People have to actually call in an order, and they will actually deliver. And this is certainly island life. There's no hesitation to deliver. But the one thing is, she says, instead of people calling door to door with the food and the drink, what they're actually doing, and it's really an extended thing, is the neighborly thing of phoning people up because they got phone service now and they actually got a bit of internet, and to take lists off of people. What do they want? What do they need? So there's a lot of people doing volunteer home delivering to make sure nobody's hungry, nobody's without medical help, everybody is safe, everybody's warm, everybody's got fuel. So this is going on. The whole First Footing, the fellowship has come to the fore more than the tradition, which I think is absolutely beautiful. And people are cooking at home for the people who can't cook. And there is some of the people that visit, they do give little donations so it can help with the food bill, because the volunteers, they don't want the volunteers to actually go broke, but it's not, it's, if people haven't got the money, they haven't. The idea is make sure everybody is supplied. And that's typical Ireland. And of course, they have the same thing as well, being Mull being a tourist place like Ireland, where we're restricted to traveling 3 miles when there's a restriction. But everybody's coming in on planes from Europe and from North America, and they seem to be able to go everywhere. And she says that's the same on Mull. They're all restricted, trying to keep safe. And there's these people from overseas wondering why they can't have the usual vacation. But I think the point there is lovely, is that fellowship. So if you've got any stories of around fellowship, because this is what this is about, and I'm going to go on to wassailing next. So this is a general tract. As I say, it's a more casual Sunday sessions to brood over this idea of fellowship. And I'm going to continue this through on next Sunday as well, a little bit more once we're into the January. But I'm going to get myself, anybody else here? Yes. Any more memories there about that, Sharon, about First Footing and people turning up? Any stories you've got from that, which would be lovely? I haven't said hello to the other people here. There's Kimberly. Good morning from Boston. And Brittany, Winnipeg, it's snowing there. And right. Okay, Sherry. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll have Sherry with a book next week. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that very soon. In fact, why don't I get onto the picture of that? And while I'm thinking about it, I haven't got the link on there. Sherry, can you post some links to your book? And I'll put the cover up right now. Here we go. There we go. In service of the King. And hopefully Sherry will be able to talk more about this. But it's really an incredible all-in packed adventure of Neve, who's going from the dark to the light, which is, of course, what the traditions right now are celebrating. But with her life, she's actually living this. And it features all sorts of symbols and beings from folklore and mythology. Mermaids are there, which I love. The fairies are there. Dragons are a huge feature on that. But I look forward to Sherry being able to present this for you. But meanwhile, hopefully she'll post a link to you of access to that, various ways that you can get it. So in the service of the King, and Sherry, you may know, she's a great supporter of these Sunday sessions, tells as many people as she can about it. So I'm looking forward when we have a bit more space next Sunday for her to actually talk to you about the book. So I hope you've gotten the notes on that, and Sherry will give the lowdown, and the contacting for that. Right, now, there we go. It's time for wassailing. Let's talk about the wassailing. I'm a little early on the wassailing, but never mind, because it give me an excuse to talk more about it next week, what I don't cover this week. Maura, unfortunately, Maura, are you around? I don't see Maura Barrett. This was when I was hoping Maura could get on to do her poems, but we had struggled with her last week, and we may end up having to have Maura on next week after all that. So she's not around at the moment. So that's one poem, one poet that we haven't got. So let's get down to a bit of wassailing. It looks like as if it's just going to be me. There was yesterday there was a multitude of guests coming on, but various reasons, the holiday, the gales, the lack of internet, we haven't got them. And funnily enough, I've got about the same internet as in Carracrory, which is great. So it's a shame if we had people live. We got the horsepower here today for them. Anyway, there's two types of wassailing. Let's get on to a bit of tree sort of goddess here. There we are, tree god, to get you in the mood for wassailing. Talking about apple trees, and sorry, I haven't got any apple trees or decor around me. In fact, there's nothing Christmassy in here. There is a lovely Christmassy room here, but if I had set up in there, it's too echoey. But it's absolutely beautiful. That Claire and the family have put together here. Oh, talking of that, I should have brought this up at the beginning before we get on to the wassailing. You might have seen this on Facebook, but Claire's daughter-in-law, she writes these beautiful journals, and very similar to when we did journaling with Sunday Session. She does drawings, and she sort of writes her thoughts and feelings. And this was her interpretation of these Sunday Sessions. There we go. And I think you can pretty much, that's in her journal. And she sent me a Christmas card with that drawing in it, which I think is absolutely delightful. The whole idea, there's the hat, there's the dungarees, and there is the spiral folklore that I'm always presenting, the spiral as against the linear, and of course very symbolic of labyrinths and labyrinth gardens. So that's Sandy Patrick's drawing there, and lovely interlude to show you that. There's somehow got to be some kind of logo of future editions, don't you agree? Anyway, two types of wassailing. Now, the wassailing itself, it's really the blessing of apple trees and thanksgiving for the cider, because you think of Ireland, especially, not so much with Scotland, although Scotland's famous for its seed potatoes, believe it or not, especially the islands, that you think of potatoes, and it's very important to have a big stash of potatoes for sustenance food through the winter. But of course, potatoes have only been around 300-400 years. I forget exactly. Anyway, Elizabethan times, and oh goodness me, and before then, what sustenance? There were leeks, there were roots, but the one thing that was very important was the apples, and apples for the vitamin C, as we know today, and it was for keeping people healthy, keeping them alive, keeping them refreshed, keeping disease. There's Claire. Hello, Claire. Answering the phone. Say hello to Claire. There we go. Very good. As I say, it's a very casual session today. Anyway, one thing about apples is the background to apples, how they actually got here. We have the crab apples, and they're through the UK. And if you've ever tried to pull a crab apple, try to eat it, and it leaves a taste in your mouth, almost like a ripe banana. It just stays there. Or if you had a fertilized cucumber, try to bite into that. And so, but the crab apples make a beautiful sauce. Put them with honey and slow, absolutely gorgeous. But the Chinese, they got hold of crab apples, and through generics, I suppose, that they perhaps learned from the Babylonians, they developed the large apples, the eating apples, like what we have today, and that we beautifully have today. Now, the one thing with the Chinese, and I only learned this recently, that at the time of the solstice, of going from that point of the short, especially North China, the time of the longest night, shortest days, that the Chinese used to give gifts at that time of apples. They would go around door to door and give apples to people as a gift. And now apparently in parts of China, they still do that in Christmas Eve, because Christianity has come into parts of China and they've adapted to a lot of the Christmas traditions. So, but they still have the apples giving as presents. And of course, I've mentioned with the Christmas trees, the hanging of apples that we do through hanging baubles on the trees. Now, what's famous from the Chinese is the setting up of the trading routes through Siberia and the north, the Silk Road. And along the Silk Road, in order to provide sustenance for the traders and travelers, that these trees that were grafted onto crab apples, because that's how they got these big apples, just like we do today, is species of apples are grafted onto the roots of crab apples. And they were planted along the Silk Road. And that gave sustenance to the travelers. And gradually these apples, they became a traveling trading commodity too. So apples came to Europe. They were grown very much in Eastern Europe, and then they spread from Eastern Europe as crops, Western Europe, and eventually over to Scotland, Ireland. So that's how we got to the apple. So really the whole wassailing tradition, though it came over perhaps with the Saxons originally to England area, the Anglo-Saxon areas, northwest Germanic area, that came off of the Silk Road, that came to us. And so it's amazing how these traditions have been evolved. And we had fun yesterday because I was talking about wassailing and first footing with Sandy, who's from Thailand, and we were comparing with what they do in their traditions in their country. And it's amazing. They do exactly the same things, maybe with different fruits and under the Buddhism, but it's the same traditions, the same fellowship. So it's all over the world. Anyway, I'll stop talking on that and get to the theme of wassailing. And so we have the wassailing. Where's my bits and pieces here? Goodness, I've lost my wares. Okay, the wassailing itself. Here we go. Annual Thanksgiving, the blessing of the fruit trees. And of course, this is really about the apple trees. And from the medieval tradition, this was always happened on the sort of 12th night, the 12th night, which is, it used to be by the old calendar, the 17th of January, but the 7th of January is our Epiphany, the 12th night. But it was, I think, it was 17th of January on the old Julian calendars. And many local traditions have altered this to the 5th or 6th of January through the use of the modern Gregorian calendars. But there is also local traditions that host wassailing on different days. It's changed over, especially the last 200 years. So there's wassailing in some areas that goes on all the way from Sawan right through to Imbolc. But in most cases, it's an Epiphany time, because that's when the sap is starting to come up into the apple trees after being still and asleep through the winter. So the tree is becoming awake. So the blessing is done as the tree is coming awake. And this really is a blessing time, as I say, for the winter season. And in Ireland, there's not been that much wassailing at all. It's fairly recent here, but it all comes from the Germanic Saxon tradition, as I say, which seems to have come off the Silk Road. And there's a Saxon call-out phrase, which is "Pu hael, be thou hail, be in good health." And the people would call back, "Drink hael," which means being healthy. And I probably got a banner with that, with what I'm talking about. There we go. There you go. Where's Pu hael? Drink hael. And let's see if I got a picture to put you up with that. There we go. Drink and be merry. There you go. There's a wassailing queen having a big mug of cider. So she would definitely be merry and wishing everybody to be merry. And this is all about cider and apple trees. And similar celebrations in Kent, anywhere where they're growing hops and barley and making ale. And while I'm thinking of it, is there anybody watching this from Clonmel? Because they're big into Apple Fest there. It's a big apple growing area, Clonmel, Tipperary. And they're doing wassailing. They're blessing their apple trees, and they're very excited. They haven't been doing it that long, but any apple celebrations to increase the abundance, they're really very excited and very committed to that. Now, before Saxon times, similar celebrations around the Mediterranean for wine. Apparently, there was west of Ireland, there was celebration of the wine that was similar to wassailing, though I'm not sure if they had vines or not. But around the Mediterranean, olive oil gets the same blessing celebration. But anyway, the medieval times, wassail is the sort of name that came from those names. Let's get it back. Westpool Ale became wassail, and that comes from the Norse, which is similar. They had Veshail, and they got that from the Silk Road, I'm sure. So the blessing of apple trees seems to have developed as a later tradition, sort of medieval onwards, and it's still growing. Let's get your pictures here. Something I wanted as a kind of blessing. Here's the king. No good picture. There's the king and queen. They're lifted up into the apple trees as part of the celebration. It's funny. I think I might have mentioned that Claire and we ended up doing an apple ceremony up. I forget the name of the town. It begins with W something. It was up in northeast Germany. And it was really funny. We were picked up from Frankfurt Airport, and the driver didn't really know where he was going. He was using a sat-nav. I don't think Google Maps was really that developed at the time. Anyway, he was using a sat-nav. He got the directions to where this conference was, that we were to perform apples. And he got lost, and he was parked outside an apple processing plant where they made the cider, they made the apple juice, and the whole village, it was surrounded by orchards. And I later found when we was having the conference there that was probably where wassailing as we know it actually originated from, but nobody had heard of it. So it was like taking refrigerators to the Eskimos in a way. That I had the 3-verse wassailing song that, by the way, I'm not going to sing it today. I'm going to get together with Claire, and on the next Sunday, which is closer to the wassailing time, we'll sing it to you, the 3 verses. But we sang them the 3 verses, and they translated it into German. So we brought wassailing back into modern German to that area. So I gather the groups of them now blessing their apple trees, bringing back the wassailing to that area in northeast Germany, which I'm absolutely delighted they've revived the tradition in some way. But wassailing is also a door-to-door sharing, and it's a sharing and a fundraising activity. So it's not only the blessing of the trees, but it's a door-to-door thing, very much like mumming that I was talking about last week, a variation on that. And they go around there, they've got the bowl, and that's full of hot, warm cider, if they can keep it warm. And it's got cinnamon toast in it, covered in cinnamon. Again, cinnamon like ginger. It's the only time of the year that they're all allowed really to use it. And they would offer them some of the wassail. There were single wassailing songs, and the gentry and the people at the house, they were given gifts of food and drink for them to go away. So it was a sort of a begging thing, but it was, here's the wassailing song. Here's a version. That's what they sing when they go door to door. So there you go. Isn't that a nice blessing? That's a real fellowship blessing and goodwill. And it's the sort of thing we need and do right now. Now, during the Saxon and into Norman times, wassailing became, as I say, it's an exchange here between peasants and the feudal lords. There's some more. There we go. That is really a begging up against the feudal lords. In that one, they were allowed in. And there was actually superstition amongst those elite lords, that these peasants, that they were regarded as pagans, had a collective spell amongst them, and they could enforce, if there was too much austerity enforced upon them by these lords, then only bad stuff would, they would curse the lords. So the the feudal lords would give the wassailers gifts of food, drink, and maybe clothing, and sometimes they'd actually give them some currency money. And I explained in previous Sunday sessions how sometimes they went to the well and they would bank some of that money actually into the logs there to bring them prosperity and good health. Maybe they didn't have access to places they could spend the coinage. But I feel some of this, I wonder, at Christmas, in your job, you get Christmas bonuses and parties that employers host. So I wonder if that's how the tradition has happened. You give the peasants, keep them happy with a nice Christmas bonus and a party, so they'll have loyalty and be kindness, and they won't curse you or put you out of business for the next year ahead. But sadly, over the years, the door-to-door wassailing has become abused because there's been ruffian lads. It was a while ago, there was ruffian lads. They started begging door-to-door and aggressively begging for the food and drink. And then if they didn't feel they didn't get enough food and drink, then they would actually go into the garden, sometimes into the home, and cause vandalism if nothing was offered, or they feel that people were being made. So the door-to-door got a bad name, and it kind of fizzled out, the door-to-door wassailing. And we're going to talk about the wassailing bowl. There's a little bit to read on the wassailing bowl. Now, it's usually made of sycamore, and it's interesting because the sycamore itself, it actually came in with the Normans. There's a lot of dispute. Some people say that Cromwell brought them in, but I think, no, Cromwell brought in the beech. The Normans brought in the sycamore because it grows quickly and it's very easy for wood workers to work on it. It's a very good building wood. And here's a sycamore bowl. There's a wassailing sycamore bowl for you. And but before the Normans arrived, sycamore was actually quite rare. So it's assumed poplar, aspen wood was used. They're both sort of whitish woods. So that was wassailing bowl. As I say, did go to, this would be the Saxons. Saxons would have used the poplar, or what you know as the aspen. But the wassailing in Ireland, when it did happen, wouldn't have happened pre-Normans. And it was likely in some way the Normans brought it in, where they picked it up from the Saxons. And toast is very much part of the wassail. As I say, it's either there's some toast hanging from a branch there, and it's either floating in the wassail bowl that I showed you, or it's served separately. Here's a wassail bowl. It's not toast. They've actually got cinnamon bread in that one, and there's the apple floating away there. And cinnamon was added either in the cider or on the toast, as I mentioned. Now, wassailers, when they went door to door, they were performing, as well as the wassailing song, there'd be other songs, music, jokes, and they would dance to music. They'd have the whistle or flute, and do whatever they can to earn what they can from the lairds. And in Scotland and Northern England, the visiting wassailing tradition, it moved in a lot of places, especially in Scotland, to Halloween guising. And as the first footing, as I mentioned, there's some guises. I've shown that before, but that's what the wassailing became more or less round when it was so on time. But the traditions have faded away, and as you're familiar, a lot of these traditions at this time are now trick or treat and so on. But no, at least the trick-or-treaters today are rarely vandals in response. That's one thing we can be grateful for. They're generally very good people for sustaining joy and gratitude. There's a nicely dressed up, a bit different to perhaps the trick-or-treaters that you get in Ireland, in the USA, but Some of them dress up like that in Ireland, some of them still in Scotland. But back to the more polite calling on the lairds. And this seemed to also be the origin. We've just gone past Boxing Day. Oh, it's St. Stephen's Day here, but Boxing Day in Scotland, not in Scotland, in England, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. And I think that door-to-door wassailing is very much the origin. It became respectable as Boxing Day to pick up your boxes from the lairds, from your employers, and that's what you got in the gifts. It's the holiday after Christmas Day. But it's St. Stephen's Day in Ireland. Of course, St. Stephen's Day is the time of the Wren boys, and I've mentioned that in the mumming and showed some pictures then. Right. So if the dim reward of the door, as I had mentioned, the family will prepare meals for the staff. It's become very organized as far as that side of the wassailing goes. So they put on meals, and at the meals they sometimes get their boxes. And at the end of the meals, that's when the laird and the family will give gift boxes for people to take home and enjoy. And there'll be thank you notes of thanking them for the service for the past year and wishing them good health and luck for the year ahead. But I'm going to go on to the blessing of the apple trees, because this is the part of wassailing I love. But let's see what you've had to say. Sherry's got her, it's in the comments there. There's a link, and hopefully you can click on that. And then Sherry's saying the book is for sale on Amazon. An auburn hair female neighbour did turn up with a blonde wig. Oh, a double whammy. You've got the red-haired kind of banshee turning up, along with the marauding Norse all in one go. Yes, that would be very funny. Well, at least people would think that was funny now. They'd be terrified and really bang the door. And anyway, she didn't want to be seen redheaded, but it was okay to be blonde. That's funny. It's very good. Charmaine, first 14 grandparents. That was explained for that. Okay, the blessing of the apple trees. And this is something probably you can all have a go at there. And we'll go back to the original picture of the family there who are kind of involved in that. And you can pretty much sum it up by just looking at that picture, which I think is absolutely lovely. But the blessing of the trees, wassailing, is still strong. It's actually still strong in a lot of areas, and it's becoming more popular. As I say, the door-to-door is not so much popular now because it's been abused, but the blessing of apple trees, blessing of trees generally, is becoming popular, not only because of the dependence on the apple trees, and I think it's become popular because it's fellowship. It's something we can do without holding, we don't need to hold the phone or the iPad. It's something where we can still get together and have a kind of fellowship. And it's very, very popular in Western England, cider counties, Devon, Somerset especially, Worcestershire, Herefordshire, parts of South Wales, definitely Herefordshire, because of Bulmers, and of course Bulmers, Magners is why I asked, is there any Clonmel people here? Because that's Magners and Bulmers, it's associated. And but now it's getting revival in South Wexford as well. So it's not just Tipperary where there's apple trees, Wexford, Waterford, and even East Cork where there's a lot more apples being grown. Apples are now being grown a lot more in Meath and Westmeath, Longford, Cavan. Certainly Leitrim has its own varieties. Meath along the Boyne has its own varieties. So I think this is a tradition. It is modern now, and it is spreading. And some people say, oh no, you can't alter the tradition. You can't mess around. You can't just play at traditions. But as you've seen with the apple, I think it started in China, moved about, and it changes. Traditions organically change, and why not? There's a lot of people that try and, I think, hold on to a fixed tradition. But if you look into it closely, it's a fixed tradition that started probably 200 years ago. So they're trying to keep things as they were 200 years ago. Anything 300, 400, 500 years ago, it's all to be traditional. That's the response I tend to get. So I suppose I'm encouraging more blessing of apple trees. And different, it's different how wassailing's done. The dates are different, as I've said, with the different villages. And the wassailing ritual, if held in Epiphany, is, as I say, is to wake up the apple trees. It's when the sap is running. And let's get something on that. Here we go. Now these guys here, there they go. They're toasting the apple tree there. And that's one way. And when they've done that toast with that, lads, they'll just then pour the cider down to the roots. That's just one step. But that's not the full wassailing, but that's a sort of a lazy way. Or maybe other people are going to appear, but they're just going to have a toast to each other and drink some of it, pour some of it, and they're going to bless the tree and the roots and wake it up. But in most areas, they appoint an apple queen, and there she is. There's an apple queen in one area. I think this is Herefordshire. And they take her off. They're carrying her off to the eldest tree in the orchard. The eldest tree in the orchard, because as you may have read recently and what I've said in Sunday session, it's the eldest tree whose roots are interlocked with all the other young trees. The eldest tree might not be giving the biggest yield, gives the smallest yield of apples, but is there motivating and teaching all the small apple trees because they are there giving the yields. But it's the eldest tree that's to be blessed and to pass on that blessing to the others. And here is the apple queen who's going to be lifted into the oldest tree in the orchard, where she places the cider and cinnamon soaked bread. You know, I showed the toast. It can be soggy bread, and it's put into the boughs. Do I have there's an apple. There they go. There's a king and queen. So you put the king up there too, and often it is youngsters, and they're going to start putting that cinnamon toast into the grooves, into the boughs of the tree. And that's to bless the tree, to nourish the tree, that the tree will actually stay strong. So you pour the cider down into the roots. For the roots, this is for the tree and for the tree and its branches to create more apples. So you're blessing the tree and say, please, let's have a big yield of apples from you, please. So that's what that is. And while the apple tree king and the apple king, he's supposed to actually be down. There's supposed to be just a queen there. So they varied this, but he's supposed to be down the bottom, pouring the cider in the roots. And then there's as I say, I showed you earlier, we're going to sing it and show you it more next week. There's a blessing verse for each action. They're kind of indulging, they're sort of blessing each other there. There's another one of king and queen, youngster, and I showed you that one of the branch. So there's a verse for blessing the roots, a verse for blessing the tree, and then there's a verse for blessing each other. And there we go. There's a circle dance around a tree, and it's all accompanied with a lot of noise in order to wake up the tree. And there they are. They're probably singing that third verse, or the fellowship circle, to bless each other. I want to say, we'll get the words. I'll get together with Claire and let's sing this next Sunday, which is closer to wassailing time. Now, in parts of the USA, please tell me, USA viewers, if this happens in your area. It's something similar to wassailing, but people throw shoes up in the tree. I don't know whereabouts in the USA, Kansas or somewhere, and they throw it for luck and blessings for the family. If they can get the shoe to stick there, that's a tree blessing. So please let me know. Does that happen in your area? Put that in the comments. Let's see, Donna's saying something. Here in New Mexico, we don't want the trees to wake up too soon, or the unsettled weather will kill the blossoms. Again, the traditions, you adapt them to the weather, the landscape conditions where you live. It just happens that in Ireland, certainly England, you can, if you put your ear up against a tree, you can sometimes hear the gurgling of the water coming up, you can actually hear it coming up through behind the bark. And then you know that that's the time for blessing. And this is true for when you get the, take the sap from when you tap the birches, a bit like you tap the maples. You listen for that gurgling sound, and that's when you undo the hole that you perhaps put a dowel in from the year before, put your tap in, and you start tapping the birches. You don't do that with the apple, it's not very nice, but it's a sign that the tree's woken up when you actually hear that. So, thank you, Donna, for that. You adapted to where you live. Yummy, yes, everything with apples is very yummy, Monica, thank you. And Sherry, with all else that has occurred in 2020, this is where yes, that's actually quite general. We didn't do very well with apples this year either. We did very well with berries. Berries was absolutely wonderful. It was a top year, but apples, pears, and I thought it was just us, and then talked to everybody else. The yields were pretty low on those, so very unfortunate. So let's get this fellowship going, and let's bless for good apple trees, good blossom, and the blossoms don't get blown off by wind. It was frost that took away the blossoms last year. Very late frosts in May and early June took away the blossoms, so they didn't form into apples. And that's why our yields were down. But fortunately, that didn't affect the berries, and it was perfect conditions for the berries. So now in the USA, there are fragments of wassailing. Oh yeah, I showed you that. We got the tree. I got you with the trees there. Now, let's move on with this wassailing. Do you know, I think I pretty much covered it, because what's been messed up here is, and the time's nearly up anyway, we didn't have the guests, we didn't have the panel, so I told you a few extra stories as a kind of a fill-in. But wassailing is growing in popularity in Scotland. There's an apple day at the end of October there, and then during early January they have wassailing in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Stirling, Jedburgh, and many towns around Fife where there's a lot of orchards. Some of the towns I can think of that has orchards nearby: Cooper, Buckhaven, Tayport. So it's becoming very popular. But as I say, unfortunately, we don't have the panel. If you've got any questions, please fire them, or any of your own experiences with first footing, with wassailing, or any customs and traditions of this year where we're going from the dark to the light, and you're involved in some kind of fellowship, and especially any stories and comments you can make of how you're working this with the COVID, with the restrictions on visiting. Like I gave first footing on the Isle of Mull, has changed from going around to people's houses to delivering boxes to people's houses, and they'll get on the phone and they'll get on the internet and have conversations. What are you lacking? How are you doing? Is there anything I can get you? Anything you need? And through conversations, what you can put in those boxes. So instead of knocking on the door with the coal and the black bun and the whiskey, it's all in the box on the doorstep, and not as nice, obviously, but it's it's keeping people alive, keeping them healthy, keeping the immune system up. It's still all fellowship, and I'm glad we'll all be glad when we're past that, won't we? So that's what's happening. So that's so the no panel today. Oh, I tell you what, we've got Marion Peter Marks. One poem. She couldn't get on today, but I do have a video of a short poem, and I'm going to try and find pictures of our apple trees. Here we go. I'm going to put her. This is pictures. These are her apple trees. Now, she got a decent bit of a crop. She's in British Columbia in Canada, and that's her crop there. And I'm going to get her video on, and you'll actually see her. And I'll get a video.
Coming to you from Chilliwack, BC, Canada. Here's my little poem about my apple tree. Ye old apple tree, gnarled and bent, 80 years spent, without fail, producing a crop each year, with surprising abundance still, enduring, resilient, it's clear. Over the years, limbs have fallen, one limb remaining, and still it stands, moss-covered, gnarled and bent, but still not spent.
There we go. Short but very sweet. Marion Peter Marks with a wee poem with her apples. Thank you, Marion, for that. Yes, thanks for that. Let's see what else you're doing. Right. Now, I'm losing my grip here, aren't I? Okay. Now, Monica. Apple orchards, farms that have festivals in October. Yeah, I know. I see that's a lovely thing through the apple areas of the USA. Been to some myself. It's great fun. Certain times of the year in Philadelphia. Maybe you ought to have wassailing as well. Make it two things, like they do. As I say, there's the apple days in Scotland, in Ireland too, but they're bringing in the wassailing too. So you've got the apple days to celebrate the harvest, and the apple fairs to celebrate the harvest. Why not have the celebration and the blessings to bring on the apple trees? And I think to do it twice like that is absolutely wonderful. And then Sherry's saying she does an inspirational post each day. She does. They're beautiful on Facebook, and she's inviting the friends request. She comes up with these amazing photos and lovely things to say about them, and how to bless the healthcare workers. So maybe take them an apple. See if we can get apples to them, baskets and bowls of apples, because they're, as I've mentioned in the autumn ones, the idea of an apple a day for the is the one through winter for the health. But you take an apple to the teacher as well, and it's not to try and nudge the teacher. It's because of the apples association to wisdom. And look, teacher, from all your serving, all your teaching me, I eat apples and I understand what you're saying. And here's an apple for you to increase your wisdom too. I just love the apple symbolism, as you can probably understand. Any excuse to bring up apples, I do. That was about a little fruit in 220. Anyway, on Sunday sessions that's coming up next week, we'll go more into the tradition. It's going to be very casual next week. Hopefully we will get a panel of guests. We will have Claire. We will go through the wassailing songs, but it's going to be featuring next week what's going to be happening with the Sunday sessions through 2021. I've been very detailed with the Sunday sessions since March, since we've gone online, since we can't have people around to the cottage. But a lot of that is going into the She, Water and Tree folklore course. And I would like it to make the Sunday sessions to be more magazine, more guests, more conversation on the specific subjects. And I hope you'll enjoy that format. And you'll be given the links to the folklore course. And as I tend to say at this time, as far as the folklore course is going, the funding of that, the Sunday sessions, which has subscriptions to pay for, and the general Labyrinth Gardens, the upkeep. This is what we do. If you become a patron subscriber there on the through Patreon, I'm not going to charge for the course, but the subscribers on Patreon, just a euro, dollar, or a pound a month or more. And I've got links over the Karakuri webpage if you don't catch that. And so all the subscribers are going to get the tutorials as I make them, and that's the subscription. There's not going to be a course fee. They'll get access to the course as it evolves with its tutorials, with its subjects, and I thank you anyway. Thank you all for your support, because most of you watching are already supporting, and it helps me to continue and helps us to continue these projects. So there's going to be topic videos, podcasts, slides, ebooks, And eventually, when several of you are together, we will go over and have our own little Zoom things as well as these broadcasters. And I'll give you some assignments to do eventually to have a go at. And if there was an assignment today, is go and find your apple trees, or go and find bless your apple trees. See how you feel about that. Write a journal about the blessing. And what did you feel? How do you feel you would need to bless? How would you share with that? How does it enhance the fellowship? That would be a kind of an assignment that we would do. Anyway, when you subscribe, after you subscribe, as the course develops, I'll message you to give you access and how to use the course, and that should start next month. So thank you for being subscribers, and I'm going to tell you what's coming up as well early next year, because we've got some lovely stuff still to come. Of course we have. And then there's Sherry. Good day and blessings to Mother Oak and as well. And there's Orchards, the festivals, you cover that. Thanks. So coming up, Sunday sessions. As I say, it's an introduction to Sunday sessions, how it's going to be in 2021. More about wassailing, more sort of paneling, I hope, with people talking about it. We'll have singing, we'll have guests, we'll have a lot of fun. And then the week after that, 10th of January, is divination. We're going into divination. We've covered the autumn divination, but this is going to be divination generally. So we're back to the folklore 10th of January, because people are making affirmations, they're making wishes in the beginning of January. So we're going to go into that and how divination is done through tradition. And then on the 17th, we're going on to Labyrinthing. And that is the early days of the Dancing Lady, the herb spiral labyrinth, the Caracrory. It's now covered in herbs, but that's in its early days where the herbs were small. So 17th of January, Sunday sessions is labyrinths and labyrinthing, and you can share your experiences on that. So anybody, any last comments to say? Thank you all for being here. Wishing you a great new year, great blessings, and hope you're all well. And thank you for Marion Peter Marks for the little bit of video there. And if you're watching this later, keep your comments coming. If you're watching the archives, I will get back and answer the comments. Also, please subscribe. Click the bell icons on YouTube and Facebook. They'll remind you of details of the next Sunday sessions. So enjoy a very safe week. Lots of wonder, full of inspiration. And it's a great time for enchantments if you allow it. It's lovely. I'm sorry you didn't have guests, but it's lovely sharing with you, with those that attended today. Happy and blessed celebrations that pass into 2021. So it's until next Sunday. Play well, and it's bye-bye. Thank you very much. Oh, I better get rid of that picture, otherwise you won't see me saying bye-bye. There we go. There we go. Hey, right. Bye-bye to you all. And thanks for joining. Thank you. Bye.